Don't hear it, Mary. Can you guys hear me? Good afternoon and welcome to our webcast, Solar Energy for Business, Myths and Realities. For those of you who I've not met, I'm Dan Meyer, publisher of BizTimes Media. Thank you for attending today's webcast, which is presented by Current Electric Company, Focus on Energy, and SVA Certified Public Accountants, and brought to you by BT360 Content Solutions, the marketing storytelling arm of BizTimes Media. The way business owners in Southeast Wisconsin think about alternative energy is changing. Less than 10 years ago, businesses were concerned about whether solar power would provide them with the energy they need. Now, business owners in Wisconsin are starting to ask if solar panels can provide them with a strong ROI and a reliable energy source. Low installation costs, favorable tax credits, and guaranteed energy rates means the ROI of solar panels is higher now than ever. Many companies have high electricity bills and energy costs are in their top 10 and sometimes even in their top 3 list of expenses. And company leaders are looking for ways to increase the cash flow and value of their business. Our presenters will discuss the following topics: mega trends and the future of solar energy in Wisconsin, available tax credits and treatments for solar energy installations, available business incentives offered by local electric utilities, ROI analysis of solar installation of your business, off-balance sheet benefits of using solar energy, and much more. The slide deck for our program is available now if you want to take notes and follow along. You'll find the link in the chat button on your screen. It will also be accessible after the program on our website. And at the conclusion, you will also find an attendee survey, and we would appreciate if you would fill out that survey to help us plan for future webcasts. Before I introduce the speakers and continue with the program, I'd like to mention that we're celebrating our 27th year as an independent family-owned business. BizTimes Media is the only locally owned business media company in the region, and it wouldn't be possible without your support. Whether it's attending events like this, print or digital advertising, event sponsorships, or BizTimes Media's BT360 content solutions, I guarantee that we'll continue to work hard every day to earn your business and to help you grow your business through our custom and integrated marketing programs. If you're interested, please contact our sales director, Linda Crawford. In addition, our award-winning editorial team is always looking for story ideas, especially if your business is expanding or moving, or if you're buying another business or building, or if you have any other news, operational insights, or information you'd like to share. Please let us know so we can help you tell your story. And in 2020, we launched our Insider Subscriber Program. Thank you to all the insiders attending today's program. For the equivalent of $8 a month, you could be an insider and receive several insider benefits, including access to all the content produced by our editorial team. And it's also your opportunity to support local journalism. Before I introduce the presenters, I want to mention that today's webcast is being recorded and will be available on demand on our website sometime tomorrow. So let's meet the presenters. Scott Bladorn is a renewable energy program manager with focus on energy. Scott, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
Glad to have you. Looking forward to it. Dan Glomsky is a CPA and principal with SVA Certified Public Accountants. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Dan, nice to meet you, and thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We're looking forward to it. And Jim Sullivan is Director of Business Development of the Commercial Solar Division of Current Electric Company. Jim, hello.
Hello. Thank you, Dan. Great to be here.
Great. So following the presentations, we'll have time for Q&A. So please remember to submit your questions you have by using the Q&A feature on your screen. So let's move on to the program. Here to kick things off is Scott Bladorn, Renewable Energy Program Manager with focus on energy. Scott, I'll turn it over to you. But first, I just want to say, created in 2001, Focus on Energy is Wisconsin Utilities' statewide program for energy efficiency and renewable energy. Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
That's right. Thank you. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. And hopefully you're familiar with Focus on Energy. Or you can go to the next slide even. We are, like Dan said, we're Wisconsin's statewide energy efficiency and renewable energy program. So in short, we help residents and businesses to make smart energy decisions, is what we like to say. So we do that by providing incentives for choosing energy efficient equipment and making upgrades. But we also do that by providing our expertise and our knowledge to businesses like yours to help you, manage your energy and make the best choices. We partner with almost every utility in the state. It's a total of 107 utilities that partner with Focus, all in Wisconsin. This is just Wisconsin. There are just a handful that opt out of Focus on Energy, but really we call ourselves a statewide program. We Energies, I'm sure many of you have We Energies as your utility. They're the biggest utility in the state, but there are also obviously a lot of small municipalities and cooperatives throughout the state. So we have a very wide reach and a lot of different partners. But if you are a We Energies customer or a customer of any of our other participating utilities, then you are eligible for Focus on Energy incentives and benefits. So you can go to the next slide. So what does Focus on Energy offer? Like I said, we offer incentives for many things along with our expertise to help you make good decisions. But I've listed here some of our most prominent offerings and kind of an overview, but we have a lot of things to offer businesses of all sizes. So we have incentives for things like lighting, HVAC, motors, kitchen equipment, ventilation, many things that use energy, and we have incentives for you to upgrade, or make changes that will save you energy. So you can check out our website. There's a lot of information there, and we'll get into maybe some other ways to interact with Focus a little bit later. But this is a webinar about solar, and really all my expertise and knowledge is in solar and renewable energy, so that's what I'm going to talk about here. But Focus's bread and butter is energy efficiency, and that's what we try to push for. Efficiency first. That's like the most important, first and foremost thing, because really less than 10% of our total budget goes towards renewables. And I like to say that the cheapest kilowatt hour is the one you'll never use. That's to say, it just makes sense to get as efficient as you possibly can before generating your own energy. And of course, there's other considerations and many reasons you might want to be looking to install your own solar. And we'll get deeper into that today. But I've just, don't want to harp on it too much. But if you're considering solar, we'll just hope that you'll consider efficiency first and then look to solar. So you can go to the next slide. So this is our basic incentive table for businesses. So this is what we offer for solar PV specifically. So I know you're like, yeah, Scott, get on with the solar part, right? Because solar is sexy and solar is what we're here for. And I get it. Solar is really great, and that's why I'm in this. But it's really getting mainstream now, and I think a lot of customers kind of expect the businesses that they work with to be on board with renewable energy and thinking about how much energy we're using, and even like potential employees might look at this. So I know there's a lot of reasons to look at this, but we offer some great incentives to help you install solar. It's up to $50,000. In fact, we have some other solar incentives, like for instance, if you're a nonprofit, for example, we have some higher incentives. We have incentives for residential customers. That's a $500 flat rate. If you put on a system and you're a residential customer, it's $500. But this table shows the incentives that pretty much all of you, I think, that are on this webinar would get for your business. So the amount of the incentive is based on the amount of the solar that you install. So how big of a system you install, that determines how much of an incentive we'll give you for it. It's kind of a progressive incentive structure. So you can see here for the first 5 kilowatts, we'll give you $200 per kilowatt. And then the incentive gets smaller on a per kW basis as the system gets bigger. And for reference, if you're wondering, like, what is a kilowatt of solar or 1 kW worth of solar, that's about 3 solar panels. It can vary. Some solar panels are more efficient and some are less, but it's a good, rough estimate. So if you, so a 5 kW system would be about 15 of your standard solar panels, more or less. So as just as an example, if you put on a 7 kW system, we would give you $200 each for those first 5 kW, and then $150 each for that 6th and 7th. So the total incentive would be, if you're following along, it would be $1,300. So that's how this works, up to $50,000. So it's a nice chunk of change if you're installing a bigger system or any size system, really. But this, I think, looking at the table for a lot of folks that are in the early stages, this can help you get a ballpark idea of what your incentive might be. If you get a few bids from solar installers, they'll definitely do this math for you. They want you to get as much incentive as possible, and they want to help you out to get this all done right. So the upshot of it here is that this can roughly get you there. If you get bids from a few different contractors, they might be varying by a few kilowatts depending on the panels they're suggesting and the way they're setting it up. But this is pretty close here. So that's probably enough about the incentives for now. So you can go to the next slide. So here I just wanted to touch on solar PV price trends. And I should mention, I say solar PV a lot. I know I did just rolls off my tongue. PV is photovoltaic. So that's what most people think of when they think of solar power. It's turning the sun's rays into electricity, right? That's PV, that's photovoltaic. So I say that a lot, so don't get confused with anything else. But anyway, solar PV price trends. So this is for the entire US, but Wisconsin is on an almost identical path. Many of you have probably heard how far and how quickly the cost of solar has come down. And that is true. And if this graph went back a few more years, it would look even more dramatic. You'll notice it's quite the drop that we've seen in the last 10, 12, 15 years. It's really has been dramatic. But the cost to install solar now, just in the last couple of years, has actually gone up just slightly. And there are a few things affecting this, like there are some solar tariffs on imported solar panels. There are supply chain issues that I'm sure many of you are experiencing as well. It's just supply and demand. And so there's a lot of things that are pushing on this. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that the price to install solar, it's really started to level out, right? And so Wood Mackenzie, who put together this chart, and they have a ton of data, and we shared data with them. They're predicting, you can see they've got some predictions for the next few years, but they're predicting that it will go down slightly over the next few years. They probably would have said that it wasn't going to go up this year, if you look back a year. But so that's all to say that if you're waiting to install solar because you think that it might get cheaper, you may actually just be missing out on kind of the benefits of it right now. And there's no guarantee that it will get cheaper. I don't know what's going to happen with the price of solar. I'm willing to say that. And I also don't know what's going to happen with utility prices or anything like that. But I wouldn't expect it to get dramatically cheaper. We're not going to continue seeing it, prices cut in half in a matter of years. We've kind of leveled out, and we've reached a place where it's not going to be very dramatic coming up. So you can go to the next slide. Yeah, and this is a Wisconsin trend that I wanted to highlight. And this is not prices, luckily. This is the amount of solar being installed by customers in Wisconsin over the past several years. So this is residential and business customers. This is all installations, just the pure number of installations. It doesn't include any utility-owned installations, though I'll mention that utility installs have just been going pretty crazy as well. There's really been a dramatic increase in the amount of utility-grade solar that is going in, and many of you may have noticed that they are popping up, and there's quite a bit more in the pipeline. So utilities are really stepping up their use of solar electric, because it really it's cost effective now for them. So obviously, or else they wouldn't be doing it. But what this chart is showing is that the amount of solar being installed kind of slowly increased year over year for quite a few years. And then in 2020, it just took off. We almost tripled the number of installations from 2019. And that was a surprise to many, I would say. Even installers and everybody was very surprised. 2020 was just a blowout kind of year. And 2021 was very similar to 2020 in terms of like the number of systems installed. It could have been higher. There were a lot of planned systems that just didn't complete in time. There have been a number of delays, again, with supply chain issues and things. So we're expecting 2022 to be another great year, and probably increase over what we're seeing here. I said I can't predict the cost of solar, and I can't predict a lot of things, but I can fairly confidently predict that the demand for solar installations is not going to fall off in the near future. It's really hot. I mean, there's, I don't know how many people are on this webinar right now. There's a lot of folks interested in it. And I've been around the solar industry since about 2006. And I can just tell you that the amount of interest right now is really through the roof. And so you're in the right place. And it's great to see, like, it's finally coming around, and it's really price driven. It used to not be that cost effective. Now it is. So, that's a big part of it, especially why businesses are thinking about it, because it can be a great way to, make an investment that is predictable and makes a lot of sense. So you can go to the next slide. I just have a couple more before I'll turn it over to Dan. But so if you're seriously considering having solar installed on your business, I would suggest you call a qualified installation contractor or two or three. At Focus on Energy, we call those contractors trade allies or trade ally contractors. they don't work for Focus on Energy, but they work with us. So you can go, these are independent businesses that, install things. So you can go to our website and use our Find a Trade Ally tool to search for a trade ally in your area. You can use your zip code and select what kind of service you're looking to have done, and solar in this case, but you'll get served up a list of contractors, trade allies in your area that can complete your project. So we always suggest getting a few bids from different contractors, doing your due diligence, but this will give you, a good list of contractors that work with Focus on Energy, and it will help maximize your incentives and work through all the hoops that you need in order to get it on your building or on the ground outside your building, wherever it may be. But we do keep tabs on this list, and we remove any problematic contractors. So this is like a curated list. We never make recommendations for a specific contractor, but for like a specific job, but we can say that this is a good resource for you to find the best fit for your project. So I hope some of you might find this tool helpful. And you can go to my last slide then. Final thing I wanted to mention was our energy advisor map. So this is also on our website, and I mentioned that we also, beyond just giving incentives, we also provide our expertise. So we employ a number of what we call energy advisors, and they are experts in many different aspects of the energy world. We don't really advise on solar projects specifically. We can help with that a little bit, but solar is actually fairly simple, and it's really kind of a bolt-on. I say bolt-on because you can bolt it right onto your building, and it's pretty much that easy, and it just does its thing, right? But some projects that you might want to do that save energy can get a lot more complicated, right? And so we have experts that are experts in all sorts of things. So all sorts of things, depending on what kind of business you are and what part of the state you're in, we have an energy advisor that can help you find opportunities to save energy. So if you'd like to talk to someone about your business and how Focus on Energy might help, and maybe look into having a walkthrough, you can check our energy advisor map, and that's a good way to get in touch with us. And so I hope that's also a good resource for you folks if you're not already familiar with an energy advisor from Focus on Energy. So I've probably talked long enough. I said I was going to keep it under 15. I'm not sure if I did, but
that was perfect.
Nailed it.
That was an A+. So thank you very much. Before we bring on our next presenter, I want to remind you to send your questions in. Please use the Q&A feature rather than the chat feature. I see there was a number of questions. I think the Q&A feature will just be a lot easier. And you can also find the slide deck on the chat feature. So Q&A for questions, slide deck for the chat feature. And somebody did ask, this program is available. Slide deck is available now there in the chat. And it's also going to be available on demand tomorrow on our website. So next is Dan Glomsky, CPA and principal with SVA Certified Public Accountants. SVA is a regional accounting firm specializing in working with business owners to grow their business. Beyond the traditional tax and audit services, SVA consults on a lot of variety of topics such as this. So Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Dan. Happy to be here, and thank you everybody for participating, and obviously relate the questions, and I think that helps with the interaction of the presentation. What I'm going to talk about right now is really what basically I view as the government's role in trying to encourage and help businesses to install these systems and help the cost. What I'm going to talk about is primarily the federal solar tax credit, and that is a very significant amount of credit that can be collected. The reality of it is, though, it's after the installation has been done, or after you have at least contracted to have or committed to having the system put in. So there might be some ability to collect the refund prior to the actual installation, but in my experiences, most of the times we apply for that credit once we're done with the project from our perspective. So the federal tax credit is something that's been around since 2006. The government programs always introduce them as a short-term period, and and through over time, they continue to extend them, alter them, and make variations to them as we go. It's a federal tax credit that's applicable to a percentage of the cost of the solar photovoltaic system. And in 2020, the phase out began with respect to this credit. So we're going to see some incremental drops, which may encourage people to act sooner than later. So that is one component of this that I guess I want everybody to get out of the presentation. And it's really based on eligible costs of the energy property. And we'll go over that in a little more detail to kind of give you a sense of what's the credit going to be calculated based on, and what do I do with that system that I put in. We can go to the next slide. So the first thing I want to cover is the credit itself. And the credit is a non-refundable credit, which means that if I have a tax situation where I owe $100,000 and I have a $150,000 credit for the solar tax credit, I can take that $100,000 of that credit and pay no taxes for that particular year. There's 50,000 of it left, of which I would then either have the ability to carry back or carry forward. And we'll touch upon that again, or remind you of that scenario. But non-refundable just means that I can't get that 50,000 back in cash to pay for the system. It's just a reduction in how much I pay in my current tax return. And in essence, makes that cash flow available for installation of the system. Qualifying taxpayers must be the owners of the system. So we can't lease the system to qualify for this tax incentive. And then the credit's available for both residential and commercial systems, with the exception of beginning in 2024, the residential piece drops off and the commercial percentage drops down dramatically. So there's a couple variables there. With that being said, as administrations change or the motivation to have more incentive or push to have businesses do these types of things, we might see them extended, might see the rate go up or somewhat stabilize for a longer period of time. But that's what we're going to talk about today, is kind of the landscape as it stands today. If we can go to the next slide. So here's what's on the table right now from the credit perspective. 2022, we can get up to a 26% tax credit. 2023, it drops down to 22%. And then here's where we drop down to 10% for 2024 and 0 for residential. And the reality of it is these credits are playing a significant element in your ROI. And as a result of that, you want to keep an eye on when you're going to commit to these systems and when you're likely going to install them. They can factor in when the credit is taken. So obviously, if we can get it in 2022, the benefit's far greater than if we do it in 2023 and later, with supplying issues and so forth, and time for analysis. You want to make sure you get started on that earlier in 2022, so you have some ability to execute what you need to prior to the end of the year. We go to the next slide. So the credit requirements is that the credit is based on the PV system, and we'll talk about some of the costs that go into that system. The other requirement is that the business has to be subject to federal income tax. So it can't be an exempt organization, for example. So this is all for profit businesses that would be eligible for that credit. Same for residential or individuals. It's got to be located in the United States. And so again, we can't install a solar system in a foreign country and try to claim the foreign tax credit on it. And then the final piece here is that the system, in most part, has to be new. There is the possibility to have a limited use. So if I want to install a system that's got some used equipment as part of that system, so long as no more than 20% of the value of the PV system is classified as used, we're still able to qualify for the credit. But you got to be mindful of that threshold as you look at what you're going to install and put into your system. Next slide. All right, so here are the eligible costs, and I think some of them are, if you've gone through the process, you've heard some of these names of what we're looking at including in our costs. And so we're looking at the panels, the inverters, the racking, balance of system equipment, sales and use tax and equipment. So anything that we have from that perspective, we want to make sure that we're capturing. And installation costs and indirect costs. The installation and indirect costs were, I think a lot of people can miss the analysis piece. And because we're just like, oh yeah, I paid this much for the racking, I paid this much for the panels. And we just look at the cost of those items. And then here's how much it costs to install, but we miss out on the indirect costs. The indirect costs of, how do we procure the products, the time of the people internally that we're using, and that type of stuff. So we should be looking at the internal costs as part of this, because the credit is based off of that total cost number. So obviously the more that we increase that cost, the more our credit opportunity is, and then the benefits, that we're able to help the government provide some benefit for will translate for us. And then there's the step-up transformers, circuit breakers, inserters, energy storage devices. Assuming, again, the renewable energy system is more than 75% of the time. So you got to kind of be mindful of those requirements in order to put that cost into the credit availability section. The other thing is we have to capitalize these costs. And when I mean capitalize this cost, we always say, that it's really going to go on our balance sheet as a fixed asset and not an expense that automatically drops to the bottom line. Now, with that being said, there's really no disadvantage to putting them onto the balance sheet from a deductibility perspective, as we'll talk about later. We have the ability to potentially expense this in the year of acquisition or in the year of placed in service, but it'll vary based on when you do that and how you do that. And we'll go over that in a little bit. The next slide, please. So I just want to talk through the credit itself and how it impacts the costs that we just talked about. So I said, okay, let's take all these costs and let's say it comes up to be $1 million, or in this case, $500,000. If we spend $500,000 on this system, we're gonna get a 26% tax credit. In order for us to not have to worry about that tax credit being a taxable event for us, we have to reduce part of the basis of that property. And then the current rule is that 1/2 of the credit has to reduce your basis. So if I have a 26% credit on a 500,000 of spend, that's 130,000 in total credit, of which I have to take 65,000 and reduce the basis of my balance sheet asset for that credit that I received. So that's important because that's how much we're going to determine our depreciation and what kind of write-off we'll get from that perspective. The property that we're putting in service, the solar panels and so forth, we're able to use a 5-year class life on it. And what the class life means is that's how long you get to depreciate and recover that cost on our financial statements from a tax perspective. With that being said, that depreciation for this property, when it's placed in service, we have the ability to use what is accelerated depreciation rules. We can use a bonus depreciation of Section 179 or what we call as makers. And these are all ways to take that expense and drop it down to reduce our taxable income in a given year. And as a result of that, we got to be careful when we place the property in service, because that's when we determine what rules to apply. So for example, 2022, we have the ability to write off 100% under bonus depreciation. That is tapering off in 2024 and so forth. So we got to watch that and see what kind of deduction we get, and that affects our ROI. And that's why we want to know how depreciation is going to factor into this scenario. The other thing is we got to be mindful that there is a recapture if you do not operate the system for 5 full years after it's placed in service. So so that's what we got to be careful from the perspective. We can't install it, take the credit, and then sell off and let somebody else take over the solar operation. Next slide. All right. So as we mentioned before, the credit is a dollar for dollar reduction of income. There's no tax refunds created as a result of this. The credit either is carried back 1 year or forward 20 years. So it should give you plenty of time to use it up. The credit is not taxable income because we're reducing that basis as I talked over. And then the credit is claimed on form 3468, which is an investment tax credit. And there's a lot of credits. I want to say that form is maybe 3 pages long with a variety of different credits that are available. But within that form is where we claim the solar tax credit. The next slide. So we covered the solar components, and I know I threw a lot at you from that perspective, but there are other incentive programs that the government does try to help or kind of defer the cost of installation of certain things. And one thing Scott mentioned is that we have these energy advisors that can come into your facility and offer alternative, ways to save and reduce your energy costs. And one option out there is one option to help that cost is a section 179D, which is an ability for you to deduct up to $1.80 per square foot of installation of energy efficient systems in buildings, lightings, heating, cooling, buildings, envelopes. And this requires that project be certificate, have a certification to it, which requires an engineer to certify that that project. And if that's the case, then we're able for this 179D, which is our ability to accelerate the depreciation on that cost. So whatever cost we put in, we don't have to capture it as a 39-year property and take that cost over 39 years. We can take that all in the year of installation. And then the other, with this somewhat benefits architect and engineer firms that do work for non-for-profits. They're able to claim that deduction on their tax return because the non-for-profit doesn't utilize that particular deduction. And it's a way to kind of incentivize even the nonprofits and help them out in that process. So we see a lot in that perspective from the 179D. And then there's other credits that we just want to make sure everybody's aware of. There's fuel cells, small wind turbines, geothermal systems, micro turbines, combined heating and power projects. So there's a lot more out there from a government support perspective. And I know we're fixated on solar today, which is exciting, but the reality of it is, if you're going with any other system, let's check to see if there's a credit opportunity for you. I think that's all I have.
Dan, thank you so much. I see a lot of great questions coming in. Please keep them coming into the Q&A part of your screen. Thanks again. Our final presenter before we do get to the Q&A is Jim Sullivan. Jim is Director of Business Development of the Commercial Solar Division of Current Electric Company. Current Electric is one of the largest solar installers in Wisconsin and provides top quality, innovative solutions and service. So Jim, I'll turn it over to you, and then after we'll get to some of the many great questions. Jim.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dan. For the next 10 minutes or so, I plan to share some of the topics, points, and themes that are most often discussed with our customers during their journey of producing their own energy via solar system investment. I will highlight what folks inside the solar industry and those who've made these investments in systems know that may surprise or be of interest to you. So I will scratch the surface of financial benefits, off-balance sheet assets or soft benefits, market pressures, mega trends, utility companies, and I'll leave you with my top 10 list for why to go solar. My presentation today will be geared toward commercial solar systems, but many of the benefits are also portable to a residential installation. If you're interested in learning more about a home system, feel free to connect with me after today's presentation. Next slide, please. I start with financial benefits. Most, if not all, of our prospective customers are surprised at how far solar power generation has advanced and matured in the last 10 years. However, it appears that solar energy production knowledge is still in a bit of a time warp. On one hand, everybody knows about it and has an opinion. And on the other hand, many of the opinions and much of the knowledge are not always up to date. Historically, a renewable energy investment has been looked at as an expense or neutral at best, and particularly by the financially focused. Today, it has become one of the best investment options available, and here's why. The return on investment of a solar system is quietly but dramatically improved over the last 5 to 10 years. Where we used to see 15+ year timeframes, it is not uncommon to see under 10 today, often 7 or 8. And this is an area I'd like to challenge conventional wisdom in regard to calculating returns. I'd like to see people look at ROI in a different way. And that is to look at it like a bond or a CD, or any investment that you can count on for steady returns for many years. Using that lens, what we see today is that the average system pays a 10% dividend year one via cost avoidance. Using the average increase in the cost of energy over 25 years, that same system pays 20+% in year 25. I picked 25 years because we use that in our performance as it is the guaranteed power performance of today's systems. Truth be told, they last many years longer. And I don't see any other investments in the financial market that can get near this. The Dow Jones Industrial claims 8.9% over 30 years, and people are generally pretty happy about that. But there is an important footnote. This assumes that you'll be using the same or more power for the years of the investment period. For companies who plan to go to market in the near future, there's a different strategy I'll weave in later. Another important financial benefit of investing in solar is bonus or accelerated depreciation. And having a flexible tax planning tool essentially is what allows the business owner. Business owners can depreciate their system in the first year, or they can spread it out over time. And this is meaningful, particularly for those of us who would rather not pay Uncle Sam more than absolutely necessary. Another discussion we frequently have that seems to get people's wheels spinning is that you have been and will be paying for electricity one way or another for a very, very long time. People have gotten used to paying their electric bill every month, no questions asked. It's become an accepted fact of life or cost of business. It's almost inescapable. So we thought. A solar system investment challenges this paradigm. For example, let's say you don't want to use your cash and put it on your roof or in a field. Using today's interest rates, you can borrow the money, and the payment to your lender is almost always less than what you save on your energy bills. So day one, you created a cash flow positive event, neutral at worst. The picture I like to try painting is borrow the money, then continue writing the same or lower check that you always have, only change the address on the envelope from your utility company to your lender. In 8 or so years, start mailing that check to yourself, and then continue doing that for the next 20+ years. Okay, to wrap up on the financial benefits section and to touch on what many solar energy producers enjoy most is improved cash flow and EBITDA. The money saved on the system improves both. This strengthens the company in the short run and makes it more valuable should it go to market down the road. Most businesses sold with a system enjoy the X factor they received for their business at the time of sale, often to the tune of the original investment. In other words, the improved cash flow is often rewarded by multiplying the energy savings by, say, 5 to 7 times. So a $50,000 energy savings may get you an extra $250,000 at the day of close. Now, before I move on to the off-balance sheet benefits, I want to recognize that as attractive an investment solar has become, it is not for everyone. We find businesses with strong balance sheets and reasonably reliable cash flow are best suited for it. For businesses in heavy expansion or contraction mode, you may want to keep your powder dry for other needs. And this is an important conversation to have if you're considering making an energy production investment. Next slide, please. Okay, for off-balance sheet assets or soft benefits, it is well known how renewable energy is more environmentally responsible, and it reduces our dependency on foreign oil. These are the most important considerations when calculating total cost of ownership and long-term implications. What isn't as well known, but is coming into focus, is the more immediate benefits found off the balance sheet, particularly in the area of recruitment of top talent. The workforce today has a choice in who they want to work for. And increasingly, they're opting for companies who have invested in sustainability initiatives. This is far more important today than in my day. And according to workforce experts, there are no signs of this slowing down. The same goes for customer acquisition. We see more and more companies choosing sustainability-minded business partners over their less sustainability-minded competitors. Renewable energy investments have marketing power that is on the rise. Signing one new customer or key employee will most certainly pay for the investment many times over. And this is over and above the financial benefits I just described. Renewable energy investments for your business also drive continuous improvement. Employees rally around saving energy, and we see bottom-up cost-saving ideas surfacing in other areas of the business. Most companies display their system performance in their lobby and shop floor. This engages employees, and they become competitive in figuring out ways to save energy used in producing your products and services. Companies on a lean journey find real synergy with this investment and their mission to root out waste and non-value added activity. My last off the balance sheet point is these investments are just downright cool. Expect your peers and neighbors to be interested in your project and want to learn more from you. One of our customers explained that he spent over a week guiding tours for his friends and associates after the system was commissioned. Next slide, please. Now, a word about pressures. Reporting sustainability metrics and carbon footprint isn't going away. In fact, it's increasing quickly. You may not be feeling it now, but there's a good chance you will, especially if you're in the supply chain of big box stores, the Department of Defense, BlackRock, or numerous other behemoth consumer products or OEM customers. Making an investment in renewable energy production can not only help you with compliance, but help you win work from competitors who are resistant to the will of these giants. Next slide, please. Now I'm pivoting to megatrends. And this is an area where we have a lot of fun discussing possibilities in the future. Hyundai Motor recently closed its internal combustion engine development division to fund its electric vehicle R&D. Other automakers are following suit. This is a huge paradigm shift and in a hurry. Nobody could have convinced me last year that the automotive industry would make such a wholesale shift and almost in tandem. What this means is that electric vehicles, or EVs, are going to grow at a much faster rate than previously predicted. It would not surprise me to see that in 5 years, the automobile dealerships will have EVs in their showrooms almost exclusively. What excites me most about all this is that there will be a massive shift and race surrounding battery technology and development. With this much money being poured into battery R&D, I expect some amazing advancements in the next few years. And this is as good a time as any to point out how well a solar energy production investment in electric vehicles pair. I'm excited that now we have the very affordable option to charge our cars at our home or office from the energy we produce. Next slide, please. Now, along comes the Ford 150 Lightning. Coming soon, Ford, and I suspect all automakers, will give us an option to be able to run our home electrical system from our electric vehicle. Later this year, we'll be able to drive home and plug our car into our home and run the house from our EV. With decreased grid reliability, I find this comforting. So speaking of the grid, how are the utilities going to respond when almost all cars sold are EV? As a society, we'll be all driving around on a microgrid. We can produce our own electricity, store it, move it, and use it as we see fit. I suspect this will be a major challenge for utilities as they try keeping up with the increased demand that EVs will place on the grid. And at the same time, more and more renewable energy projects are coming online. How are they going to manage the balancing of supply, increased customer generated supply, and new demand? So fortunately, we have some very, very bright people working on this. And being this is a math challenge above my ability, I will move on. Next slide, please. Now, for my conclusion and top 10 takeaways. Number 10, renewable energy projects support the local economy. 9, Wisconsin is actually a pretty good solar production state due to our long summer days. It is common for solar systems to produce as much electricity as you need to run your home or office. Net zero electricity is commonplace in Wisconsin. 8, according to Zillow, the addition of a solar system immediately increases the value of a home by over 4%. This bump in value is often the cost of adding the system in the first place. 7, renewable energy projects have recently become a great investment for more people than ever before. 6, make your own energy at your home or office. Put it in your car, drive around on your own grid, power your home with it in the event of an outage, take it camping with you, top off your customer's battery when they visit, give your employee of the month free fuel. You can just market the heck out of this. 5, producing your own energy at a fraction of the cost of what you're paying for it now and locking in that low rate for 30 years is a great portfolio diversification strategy. 4, renewable energy projects for your business are a growth strategy, opening up new customer employee recruitment opportunities. 3, anyone with an appetite to purchase a 7 to 8 year CD that yields 12+% should take a look at this investment strategy. 2, a solar investment pays for itself multiple times over. While other investments may have a quicker payback, they often become obsolete in a few years. Plus, you don't need to staff your system. Though it might be a little grumpy on rainy and snowy days, it never calls in sick and it never asks for a raise. And my number one reason, after a solar system pays for itself, it enters into the phase owners refer to as printing money. Thank you very much. Please reach out to any one of us if you'd like to carry on this discussion. And back to you, Dan.
All right, thanks, Jim. Love the top 10, little David Letterman in there. We've got lots of great questions, so I want to delay. I want to just get right into this. We might have some repeats, might have some further clarification, but let's say I'm an owner and I consume a lot of electricity, and I've just paid my electricity bills every month, and I tend to this, and I'm like, okay, I need to start. How do I start? Where do I go? If I'm all in, Scott, you said, work on your efficiencies first. What does that include? Lightings and various other things. But I really want to do the solar, and then tell me about the costs, and I'll get back to some of this with additional questions. But from start to finish, how quickly could I do it? How much does it cost, and where do I get started? So any and all of you maybe tackle that one kind of as a big overarching question.
I'll just maybe start. I mean, again, push efficiency. You mentioned lighting. Lighting is still a really easy and super quick payback. Just makes a ton of sense. I mean, there are a lot of things that maybe you're not thinking about. Excuse me. I would probably say contact an energy advisor. That's a great start. Talk to your energy advisor, and they might want to do a walkthrough and kind of get you started. If you don't have a plan, if you don't have an energy plan, that probably makes sense. And depending on how big you are, the more energy you use, the more of an energy plan you should have, right? If you use a lot of energy, if you're paying like, a few $100,000 a year in energy bills, you should probably have someone on staff that is an energy manager. If that's not their full-time, at least a half-time position. It's amazing how much energy you can save by being super smart with energy, and then look to supplement that with your own generation. So I'm always, this is like my focus hat that I wear, that we say efficiency first. But that's where you gotta have a plan. You gotta have a vision and a plan. And a lot of times that just means finding someone that can work with you to do that. So that would be my suggestion: is find a consultant, talk to an energy advisor, or get somebody on staff that knows this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Jim, Dan, any further comments?
Yeah, I'll add on to what Scott said. It is definitely, find the efficiencies first. That's the low-hanging fruit, we say. It's always going to be your fastest return on investment. But there are technologies and services that are becoming more popular. And we can now go into a larger energy user, and after about 30 days, we can tap into their systems and get real-time data on how they're using their energy. And then we can display that data, and then they can make business decisions on whether they can change their behaviors. And sometimes just changing the behavior of how you use energy can save them a tremendous amount of money. So that's kind of a revolutionary, fairly new approach that folks like us in the industry are taking now.
Dan, anything?
Yeah, nothing on how to go about it. I think Scott and Jim are the right spot to start the process. It starts to me with taking a look at those types of costs and being aware of and starting to say, okay, this is something I can control and do something about. So really, to me, from my perspective, that process starts internally, right, with the organization making an assessment of, can we do better, and then challenging the organization to go and seek that solution.
And from start to finish, let's say, okay, I got energy efficient lights, and I want to go with the solar production. Let's say you're a 50,000 square foot or 25 or 100? Give us some scenarios. How long does it take to be up and running where you can start the clock ticking in terms of ROI and getting the credits? Is that a 6-month, 3-month, year plus project?
So depending on the complexity of the project, difficulty of the roof, if they need to make any repairs first, field mount, roof mount, their internal architecture, the fast track would be a few months. They should really plan on a 6-month cycle so that we can really get in there and they can tap on all those resources and make sure that they're fully understanding what the performance of the system would be, and then how to improve the performance of the system as time goes on with continual paying attention. And that's one of the things I mentioned before, is that pretty much all the companies try to display this, and there's a lot of great conversation that comes out of it, and people get engaged. And so it's a good employee engagement initiative, if nothing else. But they get engaged and they try to find other ways of saving money. And sometimes that goes right into, how they produce the product, and saves in areas you wouldn't have thought of on the surface.
So the gross cost before the tax incentives and other incentives, this is a multi-part question. How much does it cost? And I know that depends. But is there a minimum size company, whether it's the footprint of the building and the roof, where it makes sense? It's like, oh, you've got to be at least 10,000 square feet or 100,000 square feet. And how much energy do I consume each month for that to make sense? And there's a specific question on the pre-registration. There's a 50,000 square foot building. How much energy can you produce? Will running one shift only business have a big impact on ROI? Can you do it on one shift, 2 shifts, 3 shifts? A lot of questions there, but kind of talk about minimums. What's the sweet spot if it really starts to kick in, to realize a decent benefit to go through this?
Scott, you want to start off?
Yeah, I could speak to this a little bit. In terms of like how much does it cost, and I mean that is very, very much dependent on the size of the system. So I had this slide up about system costs averages, right? And the residential line was higher than the commercial line, and that's because your average residential system is about 7 kilowatts, and our average for business here in Wisconsin is somewhere around like 50, 75. It varies year by year, but the larger the system you get just economies of scale. So if you have a small system, it might cost over $3 per watt. And if you have a really large system, it could be as low as like $1.50 per watt, maybe. That would be a really big system, but even under $2 a watt, that's a pretty good price. So it's really dependent on how big. Now, that doesn't mean that a small company should say, oh, this doesn't make sense for me because I'm less than X square feet. I think it's just having that, awareness going in that you don't have that much load, so you don't need that much solar. Therefore, you will pay a little bit more, and that also varies, of course, like if a 50,000 square foot, building with a flat roof, well, depends on how much stuff is up there. What obstructions are there? There are a lot of different, so it's really hard to, I know everybody wants that, like how much, that rule of thumb, how much does this cost? And it's
There's so many variables. Yeah.
There are a lot of variables. So I would suggest, again, like I said earlier, call a couple of contractors, get somebody out there and have them look, and they can, give you a price for what they're offering. And there are some different installation methods and ways of things you're going to do on a flat roof. And so it's worth checking out and seeing, what does it meet your appetite for a simple payback or an ROI.
Any other guys want to comment? If not, that's fine.
Yeah, just a last quick word is that Scott's spot on. It's just so variable. We've seen companies in 50,000 square foot running 3 shifts with heavy equipment that are just enormous power users. And we've seen, several 100,000 square feet more of a warehouse operation with nowhere near that kind of consumption. On the residential side, I think the question had something to do with how much energy you need to use. I think maybe rule of thumb is if you're spending $1,000 on your electric bill over the year, you're probably going to see a reasonable ROI on your residential installation.
The year or over the month?
Year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really?
And then on the commercial side, I guess you could start there, but generally we see bills that we get some pretty attractive returns in that 5,000 on up, $10,000 per year on up.
Wow. So it's a pretty low threshold where you can really see some returns.
Yeah.
So Dan, you alluded to this earlier. I saw a number. There's a 26% tax credit in 2022. We're in 2022 right now. If this takes 3 or 6 months to do, next year it's a 22%. Do you have any insight? And it's 10% just for commercial the year after that. There's a question on here, the very simple question: why now? Why do this now? Maybe you want to tackle that. The other guys have kind of addressed some of this. Costs are lower, but that really jumped out at me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, when we're doing the ROI, the return on investment analysis, a big number in this right now is that tax credit, right? So if I'm taking and getting a tax credit, for example, I had a client that had a $2 million system put in, and they were getting almost a $500,000 credit. Well, that really affects their ROI. And if I take and I now drop it down to, and now it had a payback of like 7 years before they were what I believe was a comfortable return based on their energy savings and the depreciation and the other deductions that they got. Now, from there, if I now drop to the 22%, right, then I'm looking at maybe a 9-year payback. So just that moving of a 4% can change things. And with that ROI, obviously, there's a lot of conservative analysis as part of that. How much is the energy cost going to increase, right? So we're going to put a 2% or a 5%, right? There's a lot of variables going into that. But anytime we're looking at the ROI, I like to go on the conservative side. If I like the answer, then I want to proceed. So as the tax rates start to drop down on these credits, that ROI impact starts adding class lives or adding years for your payback that you want to be mindful of as part of that process. So why now? That's a good reason now. The requirement is that the construction has to start in 2022.
Okay.
So if the construction starts in 2022, we're eligible for the credit. We don't get the depreciation and that type of thing until we put it in service. But all we need to do is start that construction. But as I said earlier, you want to get on this sooner, because I had a client that started this analysis in June, and they were scraping whether they could start it by December. And obviously with weather and everything else and then the supply chain, it got close, but it's a long process.
Yeah. The Wall Street Journal had a big section last Sunday called "The Power Struggle," and it talked about rolling blackouts and aging infrastructure. Jim, you touched on it a little bit, and I know that we've got a very stable system in Wisconsin, but could that, with the continued reliance on energy, and could that have an impact, or could that also be a reason to jump on board? And if not, the follow-up question is, this might look so attractive, maybe I can be a revenue producer, I can be a net positive. How much energy can I produce and sell? And could that be a reason to start now? Scott, you touched on that yesterday when we chatted. Can I sell my energy? I'll do this. I'll sell it. What makes sense there?
Yes, you can sell your energy, and this is a really good point that I think everybody should understand, right? Is like, you want to size your system correctly. Every utility is different in terms of their what we call net metering, right? They all have different policies, but generally speaking, when you overproduce during the day, for example, and then you maybe use energy at night, your utility will give you credits for what you produced, and you'll make up for when you use it later. And most will settle this up on a monthly basis. So if you use 100 kWh and you produce 99 kWh, you'll only owe for that one, right? Very low numbers, but just for example. But if you produce 101 kWh and you only used 100, they're going to pay you back at the wholesale rate, or maybe what they call the avoided cost rate, which is much lower than what you actually pay. So generally, if you're overproducing, you're going to get about 3 cents, maybe a little less than 3 cents per kilowatt hour back, but you generally are paying for a business around, I'm going to say around 9 cents per kWh. So it doesn't really make sense to overproduce. You want to size it so that you're really right around the cutoff, because you're not really going to get a great return. Your return will be a lot slower on anything you overproduce.
Right, that makes sense. Let's talk about battery storage. We touched on another part of this a little earlier. Your ROI depends, and I think, Scott, your advisors do an analysis. If you're able to minimize or reduce some of the peak hour usage and shift that to a second or third shift, that probably comes into play. But how does the current state of the battery backup systems play into this, if any? And I'm curious about how that might work or fits in.
I'm happy to speak to this one too. I'm not a battery expert. Focus on Energy, we don't give incentives for batteries because batteries don't actually save or produce energy, right? They just kind of shift loads to different times, which can be really useful for a customer, because you can shift some of your load to a time of day when electric rates are cheaper. So that's a big factor. Or sometimes you can shave some of your peak demand charges, if you're familiar with those, if you're, especially large energy users or manufacturers and things. A lot of your energy bill is based on your peak demand. And if you can shave some of that off, you can have huge savings that, pay off throughout the year. And it can be substantial in some cases. In other cases, like a lot of homeowners, they are not getting really savings for it in particular, but they're doing it because they want to have power if and when the grid goes down, right? Generally, those are for short periods of time. In Wisconsin, we have really top-notch utilities that our uptime is 99% plus, so we're doing great, really great there. But if it's a matter of you're a customer that needs to be up all the time, then it can be a lot more important. You mentioned microgrids earlier, the folks that do microgrids and the folks that are generally doing storage are customers that need to have that energy at all times. So you're talking about hospitals, assisted living facilities, maybe police stations, maybe some other government facilities that are health and safety related things that we need this up, right? And you can go with a diesel generator. That is another kind of backup, but the battery is seamless, right? And it just continues going there. It's automatic and it just does its thing. So that is really, I think we see more. There are some microgrids in the state, but they're more for those folks that generally need to be up. And I think we'll see more of that for those kind of customers.
So I'll jump in on the battery discussion also. Yeah, Scott, to your point, there are people that just absolutely positively need it. Data centers, hospitals, you'd mentioned a number of them. But there's also, for instance, we live rurally and we get a little bit more sporadic, power than some of the more of the urban areas. So we also have sump pump. And if that thing goes out in the spring when it's running, I'm going to have a real trouble on my hands. So we see a lot of businesses approach it that way also, in that they keep, some infrastructure up and running. So when that last big outage came through the New Berlin area, there were some folks that lost power for a few days. And that really shut down businesses. So we had a lot of, smart investments made recently that said, okay, battery might not be affordable to run my whole company, but boy, I've got to keep my order entry and customer service, data processing systems, IT systems running. So we're seeing a lot more people go to it that way. And then I had mentioned earlier that, with the flood of R&D money coming out of the automakers, that's going to be a really interesting, area to keep our eyes on. And I think we're going to probably start to see down the road that you can get some pretty quick returns on investments. We had mentioned peak shaving a little bit. We won't get into that today. It's a little bit more technical, I think, than we want to talk about. But there's also a way to reduce your energy bill just by the time of when you use it, and sometimes batteries can play very nicely there. It's always a lot of moving parts when we go in and consult with customers, and we take into all of that into consideration. Plus, energy growth with the EVs coming online. So that's what I'd like to add on to Scott's piece.
Sure. Scott, you mentioned microgrids. Can you, all of you, talk a little bit about that if you're willing? How do those work? Who's involved with a microgrid? Is that at a university or a healthcare campus, or is that something that could be done at an industrial park where you need collaboration with the developers and the real estate community to set something up? And could you retrofit it, or would that be something that you could only do or best to do when it's new?
Yeah, you could definitely retrofit it. If they vary. There's a lot of different flavors to microgrids. There's the Buboltz. I think it's called the Buboltz Nature Center up in Appleton. Has this amazing microgrid that they built as like an educational center. And if this is something you're interested in, I would highly suggest that. It's super cool. They've got solar. They've got a micro turbine that burns natural gas and will produce heat and power, so they can power their building with natural gas if the electric grid went down. They also have, actually that runs on hydrogen. They have a hydrogen electrolyzer, so they can turn water into hydrogen, and they can store that in tanks, much like a propane tank, and then they can burn that and make electricity with that. And they have a big battery system. They have all sorts of stuff, but there's different configurations that you could do to get yourself to be what you would call a microgrid. But basically, if the grid goes down, right, you have a way to sustain yourself for whatever period of time you deem is necessary. And definitely if you've got enough equipment and solar power potentially to do that.
And theoretically, you could do that for an industrial park, couldn't you? If it's a new or a used one, if you've got the land where all the companies could share.
Well, that is a different situation, yeah, and that's a tough one because you're all different customers and they're all on different meters, and I don't know that you'd be able to share in a microgrid. That would be similar to what we would call community solar, and that really we don't have that in Wisconsin because we have regulated monopoly utilities, and it's just a difficult situation for them to all these different basically what it would be a small utility, and so really it is for microgrids. It's really just like one customer. You'd have to have it yourself. Yeah.
Hey Dan, there's a bunch of questions real estate related. What have your clients, or what is your insight as it relates to investing in solar power? One question was, is it common to see private equity companies implementing solar systems at their properties to add value and or to fulfill ESG initiatives? Not sure what ESG is, not being in the business. But just individually, have you seen where a business, the asset of that solar investment is favorable from an asset standpoint?
Yeah, so to date, it's not something that's taken a lot of, we've seen a lot of traction in. I think from the perspective of in the real estate, putting more investment into the property is usually the last level. But I do I do see from my perspective, I do see the benefits and obviously the increase in value, the trend of where people, want to reside, right? They want to be in more of a self-sustaining unit, and that type of stuff are all about giving back to the planet and so forth. So I think when we talk about off balance sheet type of things, I think these are areas that start getting, attraction and attention that allows for, more activity in this area. But I have not seen to date, I have not seen a lot of on the real estate and the PE firms going for, the solar perspective. I don't know, maybe Jim, you've seen that a little bit more than I have, but from my client perspective, we're really slow at getting into that zone.
Yeah, we see that PE firms, it depends on their strategy. If they've got a buy, grow, hold strategy, then they're more amenable to it than folks that are looking at perhaps divesting that in 5 to 7 years. Although I think if we could see some movement in that area, because it still pays that nice dividend I was telling you about, and it does improve the cash flow and EBITDA. So that might be where I'd mentioned earlier, where not everybody's up to date on their knowledge. I'm not so sure as I go through the state and talk to business owners, and numbers of them are PE firms. If they really have gotten the up-to-date information and grasp that there's a lot of ways of looking at this thing. I had mentioned earlier in my presentation that, and this might be for a more forward-looking PE firm, in that they hire one key employee, or they get one new key customer out of it, and that speaks to the ESG piece for you, Dan. That's the sustainability piece in the scorecard. They can pay for that system just by that one hire or just by that one customer. So it's difficult to put a number on the off balance sheet or the soft benefits, but we see more and more people looking at it to try to make that a competitive advantage. And I think we're going to see more movement there. So I don't think it's going to be just, the hard numbers going forward.
Yeah, that would make sense to me. So a two-part question.
And let me just add to,
Sure.
Jim mentioned early on that, one of the stronger candidates for this type of thing is somebody with a strong balance sheet, right? And, a lot of times real estate's already has a mortgage on it of substantial size, that type of stuff. So it's, that it's just, I agree that it's, we should be looking at it, right, and so forth. But I'm not sure they're the best candidate unless they're ready to invest that capital. And in my experience, a lot of them have not been.
Interesting. All right, so you touched on it earlier, I think, Jim, the expected life of a solar installation. What's the warranty of an installed system? And then a second part is another question: does the installation of a rooftop system drive up building insurance, maintenance, building insurance rates due to the possibility of damage due to hail, trees, etc.? I'm sure that probably goes into the ROI, but are insurance rates affected? What if it rains? What if it snows and the solar obviously can't work?
Right.
If it's covered, if you can address some of those issues.
I'm not running into a lot of that. Dan, I don't know, are some of your customers reporting that anything went up on that regard?
Yeah, I haven't seen any substantial increases in insurance. There's probably some, right? But I at this point I haven't quantified a significant increase on that side.
Mm-hmm.
I'll add one thing that actually now I'm thinking about it. I don't know if it's true for businesses as well, but definitely for on the residential side, your tax bill can't go up because of added value to your home because of the solar system. So your tax assessment doesn't reflect the added value that you get. We know that you can get basically your money back and then some if you put a solar system on your house. But the tax man can't hike your rates based on that system. I don't know if that's true for businesses though too. So as I started saying, I was like, maybe that's not appropriate here, but I should look into that because I should know. But
Dan, no.
Yeah, and a lot of this is we're in the. I still believe we're in the early stages of the state kind of embracing solar. I mean, I can think of seeing more and more solar panels as I drive around and that type of thing, but I still don't feel the magnitude of it's everywhere, right? And so I think a lot of the issues we talk about, maintenance costs and system failures and that type of stuff, I haven't, from my client's perspective, seen any real issues from that perspective, and that they continue to see the benefits that they expected. So from that perspective, it's something you want to ask questions about and you want to evaluate, and that there's different warranties and that type of stuff. And I assume there's different types of products that, and different solutions to a lot of these things. So as you go through the analysis, those are questions that I think are valid, and that's what we should be asking and trying to find out. But at this point, like I said, the clients that I'm working on, we're really early on we're 4 years out, and it's not been any issues from that perspective, but we're still very early in trying to get embracing the solar panels.
Jim, there was a question. This individual had a PV installed 14 years ago, and they needed some maintenance. Some contractors were excited to replace the panels, but nobody wanted to do the maintenance. Can you talk from your company's experience about the maintenance on the residential side and certainly on the commercial side? You said, they last 25 years, or the warranty is 25 years, but the likelihood of that being much greater is much greater than that.
Right. Sure. Well, all of the systems that we deliver, they're warranted and craftsmanship, workmanship, production, and we'll be there for 25 years. We've been around since '83. We're probably going to be around another 40 years. And we take that very seriously. So we are going to work on any system we installed. There's not a whole lot of moving parts to these things. So I'm not really sure what piece went wrong, or it's an older vintage, but I really can't speak to the customer's concerns. Only that a reputable large general contractor like ourselves would be there for them every step of the way for that many years and well into the future.
Yeah, and I could add that it's very rare for panels to go bad. They will degenerate slightly over time, but it's super, super rare for panels to go bad. But if it did happen, I don't think you could work on solar panels. Now, if the inverter, the other important piece to the solar system is the panels, and then the inverter, which actually turns that direct current into alternating current and lets us actually use it in our houses. The inverter is more likely to go up, but the cost for that is much lower than all the panels. And yeah, I don't know that I've ever heard of panels going bad. There's more cases where people will say, "Oh, I've had these solar panels for 25 years and they're still doing great," and they get their solar badge or whatever they get for having the oldest solar panels. They get their solar street cred. So that's an odd one. I've not heard of panels going bad.
You mentioned this earlier. There's a question, and I'm curious too, just for our own home. What's the average monthly electric use for homeowners, so we know how big a system that makes sense? That's a different question that I have. What's kind of the minimum level of monthly, or yearly, where it does make sense for a homeowner to install?
Yeah, your average. So I think your average home is using about 1,000 kilowatts per month. That's roughly right. It's
And how much is that? How much money?
That's about $140, depending on your utility charges, but that's about $100 to $140 per month. Right now, our average, what we see for an average system size being installed is 7 kilowatts, and that's gone up as the price has gone down. The size of systems has gone up, but I think you're seeing now we're kind of at that point where 7 kilowatts is about right size for most customers. It used to be they were undersized just because it was more expensive, and now we're to the point where maybe they're only undersized if they don't have the proper roof for it. Homeowners are very, very stuck with the roof that they have in general. So yeah, I guess the short answer is about 7 kilowatts is going to be pretty good. If you have a smaller house and it'll use less energy, maybe a little bit smaller, but that's a good starting point.
Jim,
Yeah,
is that
I would agree. That $1,000 to $1,500 annually is a nice spot. But what we do see is that our customers, once they start learning more and more about it, if they're given the choice, and sometimes they just do it because they want to, produce their own energy, they start to put in more electric appliances. So for instance, they might get rid of their gas stove and put electric in, might get rid of their gas driver, put electric in, so that they can, take advantage of being, investing in essentially locking in their energy rate for 30 years, prepaying for it, and it pays for itself in 7 to 10.
just real quickly for a home, a smaller end homes, is that a $5, $10, $50,000 investment before incentives?
For a home?
Yeah.
No, it's, depending on the system size, you're anywhere from 15 to 25,000 bucks on, the 80% rule or medium.
Interesting. What happens if my electrical energy needs go down? I don't need as much power production as I've invested in. Jim, that was a question for you.
Sure. Well, that's probably a good problem to have because you're going to be saving money. Again, but if they probably won't either because with the EVs coming online. So, we haven't really seen a whole lot of that, but it's really, we can overproduce like Scott had mentioned before, and we get able to get some wholesale credits back from a utility company that could offset some of the overproduction, your increased electrical needs, throwing in electric heat, throwing in electric water, throwing in electric appliances could certainly very quickly get you right back up to what you invested in. And certainly an EV is going to put the icing on that cake. So it's really, it would be pretty rare that I think we would see that.
Okay. I'm going to just do some rapid fire questions because we just have a few more minutes. I assume roofs are the most prevalent areas to install panels. How do you get past an aging roof and when to install it? This was our hang up the last time when we looked at this.
So that's a question we have early on with all of our customers. The roof should be in decent repair, but there's strategies on how to do that. They can do that in the commercial setting. They can do that in phases. And as I think Dan mentioned earlier, that some of the roofing investments also can take advantage of the 26% tax credit. So if a new roof is in somebody's future, they're might not be able to get a better deal than pairing that with solar at the same time. But yes, the roof should be taken into consideration and should be under decent repair. It doesn't have to be a new roof.
Scott, are the roof incentives?
Focus on Energy doesn't have any roof incentives, no.
Okay.
If you were adding insulation, then yes, we can incentivize that. So it might be a good time to add insulation depending on the makeup of your buildings. But yeah, not just for roofs. We don't have anything for that.
Dan, any other comments?
I just said you got to be careful on what portion of the roof we're able to claim the credit on. So there is restrictions on that. So we would look at that and obviously try to carve out as much as possible. But the roof by itself isn't necessarily credit eligible. But once the panels and so forth become part of the roof, there could be some system credits as a result of that. So again, just be mindful of that analysis.
Okay. If you have a backup generator with a transfer switch and UPS on a business, can a solar system tie into that? Or does it need a separate system and its own UPS? So a transfer switch and a UPS on the business, can the solar system tie into that? Or does it need a separate system?
Scott, you want to?
Yeah, I don't. I'm sorry. I don't know.
I think what they're getting at is can you fill your battery up with solar power? And UPS is essentially battery. And the short answer is yes. But everybody is, very unique. It takes a little bit more than that question might be able to be answered a number of different ways depending on what we learned.
Mm-hmm. And how many kilowatts does a solar panel produce?
Roughly 350. they get better all the time. So you can get, I think I saw like now there's a manufacturer with a like a 490 watt per panel, but you pay for that. But I think the average is right around 350 right now.
Yeah.
350 watts. Yeah.
All right, there's a long question here. All right, so we're basically at the end. I'm gonna just go down the lineup. You guys each have a last word. I did have one question here: is what's the biggest misconception that you hear from clients considering solar? So maybe you can incorporate that into your final statement. So Scott, you go first.
Okay, I'll use my final statement to answer one question and to plug Focus on Energy all in one. So somebody had asked questions about real estate developers and things like that. So yes, Focus on Energy works with all sorts of customers, but for new construction, we have a energy design assistance offering. We provide free customized like whole building analysis. So when you're in the design phase of something, we can help you design a better product, and we will give incentives to the actual designers, and we'll give incentives to the building owner to help us get in there and help you figure out, like, make the decisions. If you do X, how much will you save annually and how long is the payback? We lay all that out nicely for you. So
That's great.
yeah, it's super nice. It's one of the best ways. I mean, if you're building something new, in my head, it's like some of the, it's not even, doesn't cost you anything. It's not the best money you could spend because you don't spend anything just getting this knowledge. So it's a really great offering. And we have a lot of great offerings, efficiency, and then solar. And you can also incorporate that into your brand new building. And man, that like sounds perfect to me.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Dan.
First of all, Dan, thanks for, I guess, bringing this topic out. I think it's very relevant, and I'm excited to be part of it. I think, we're seeing more, clients that I would never have thought about them as embracing solar and that type of stuff. We're seeing a lot of movement from that perspective as well. I'm just really, I think getting information out there, getting people starting on the process of analysis is really the key. And, let's just try to continue that motivation.
Great. Jim, bring us home.
All right. So yeah, what I would like to express is that energy is not going to get any cheaper. So the time to buy solar was some time ago. So the sooner you get it, the better. It's going to save you money day one. You're pre-buying, you're setting that rate for that amount that you're going to produce. I think that people can look at it an ROI, but I think they also have to look at this as a dividend. And I believe that if anybody is in a reasonably strong cash position, and that's either residential or commercial, it is one of the best investment options that they can find right now, because it is almost guaranteed. As long as they're going to use that power, they are going to get those returns. It is a blue chip investment under those circumstances.
Yeah, that's a very good, interesting way of looking at it. All right, everybody. So this concludes our webcast. Thank you to our presenters, Jim Sullivan with Kern Electric Company, Scott Bladern from Focus on Energy, Dan Glomsky with SVA Certified Public Accountants. These are the experts. Make sure to reach out to them if you have any additional questions regarding using solar energy for your business or home. And as I mentioned earlier, this webcast recording will be available on our website sometime tomorrow, and the slide deck's available now and will be accessible then as well. We value your feedback, so as we look to have more of webcasts like this, we'd appreciate if you fill out the attendee survey, which will open in a new tab once you close the webcast in your browser. So thanks again on behalf of our webcast presenters and partners, Kern Electric, Focus on Energy, SVA, and BT360 Content Solutions. Thank you for coming, and enjoy the rest of the day. And thanks to our presenters for sharing their knowledge with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Everyone.
Okay, bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.